Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with chicken pastina. That's right, if you're a young kid in Italy and you don't feel good, there's a very good chance you're getting a bowl of this, which makes sense, since few things are as comforting and delicious, and it just makes everything seem much better. And yes, it works exactly the same on adults. So with that, let's go ahead and get started by adding some bone-in skin on chicken thighs to a soup pot. Since what I think we should do first is what we call in the business fortifying a broth. And to do that, we will add some carrots, celery, and onions to our chicken, along with a bay leaf and a couple cloves of garlic. And then what we'll do is pour in some ready-to-use chicken broth, as well as some cold fresh water. And then once everything's in, we'll bring this up to a simmer on high heat. And what happens if you simmer a ready-to-use chicken broth from the store with some actual fresh chicken in it? What you end up with tastes like a completely homemade broth, except maybe possibly even a little more flavorful. So what we'll do once this does come to a simmer is reduce our heat to about low, or whatever setting will maintain a nice gentle simmer. And we will simmer this for about an hour and a half, or until our chicken thighs are very tender, and we'll be able to pull the bone out with very little effort. And once that happens, we'll remove the chicken, and then strain the broth. And if everything goes according to plan, we should end up with about 4 cups of a very strong, very flavorful chicken broth. And if you're thinking, why not just use all water and just add more of it, and just make a regular chicken broth? Well, that would work, but most of the flavor would be pulled out of the chicken. And besides making the broth taste better, I want to be able to eat that meat later, whether it's cubed up in this soup, or for a chicken salad, or for some tacos. And by cooking it in some broth, it's going to stay way more flavorful. Okay, so basically this step is optional, but as I just explained, by using this method, we get some delicious chicken meat to use later, and we've made store-bought stock taste like homemade. But in any event, no matter what broth you're using, we will bring 4 cups up to a simmer on medium-high heat, and we'll also season this with some salt, unless that's already been done. And that's it. Once our broth is simmering, we can reduce our heat to medium, and we can stir in whatever pastina we're going to use. And what I'm going to use is some stellina, which is star-shaped pasta, and a very classic choice. But as long as it's tiny, you can use any shape you want. I mean, you are, after all, the king or the queen of your chicken pastina. And what we'll do is go ahead and stir that in. And speaking of kings and queens, you know who didn't get to grow up eating this? Royalty. Oh yeah, sometimes a humble beginning can have its advantages. But anyway, once our pastina's in, we will cook this, stirring occasionally, for almost, but not quite, the full time on the package. Right, this one's said to cook for 6 minutes, but I'm going to start tasting and testing it about 30 seconds before that. Since while we definitely don't want this undercooked, we certainly don't want it overcooked. And when we do turn off the heat to add the last few ingredients, it is going to continue to cook a little bit and soften up. So basically, we want to stop and turn off the heat when it's about 95% there. And by the way, everybody has their own personal perfect ratio between the broth and the pasta. Okay, some people like it super brothy, whereas many versions you end up with almost no broth at all. And personally, I'm somewhere in the middle. And I think 1 cup of pastina to 4 cups of broth is ideal. But this is very simple to adjust to your tastes by simply adding more or less pastina. But either way, once that's cooked to our preferred doneness, we will turn off the heat. And we will finish this with a very generous pinch of freshly ground black pepper, as well as a couple tablespoons of butter. And then last but not least, a very generous addition of freshly grated Parmesan. Oh yeah, the real stuff, Parmigiano Reggiano. And what we'll do is stir that in. And believe it or not, that's pretty much it. Right, once our cheese is melted in, and that butter's disappeared, and also we've tasted it for seasoning, of course, which I didn't show, but probably should have. Since that is key no matter what you're cooking, and a lot of people forget to do that. But anyway, once all that's happened, we'll grab a ladle and serve up into some hopefully hot bowls, since that's always a nice touch. And then usually this is garnished very simply with just another pinch of black pepper, plus a little more Parmesan, and probably a little drizzle of olive oil. But since we did a fortified broth, I had some flavorful chicken around, which I cubed up and browned in a pan to warm it up. And I'm going to dress this up with a couple spoons of that. Oh, and as you may have noticed, the texture of our pastina is actually thickened up just in the short time since we turned off the heat, which is why I tend to go a little bit towards the brothy side. And while I do think this is already beautiful, the colors are a little bit on the drab side. So I do like to garnish with a little bit of fresh hot chili pepper, just to brighten things up and add a little heat. And that's it. I finished up with one last grating of cheese, as well as a little drizzle of olive oil. And plain's fine, but I had some basil-infused olive oil from another recipe experiment I'm working on. So I spooned over some of that, and then garnished with a very small, incredibly adorable basil sprig, and my chicken pastina was ready to enjoy. So I grabbed a spoon and went in for the official taste, starting with a spoon of just the pastina and broth. And that, my friends, is like a big warm hug from an Italian grandma on a spoon. All right, there's many things we call comfort food. And then there are bowls of food like this, which quite literally will change your mood. And not just mood, your whole outlook on life. All right, if you've had a really bad day at work, don't mix up a drink. That only helps for a few minutes, and then you probably feel worse. Whereas a big hot bowl of this not only has immediate positive effects, but also much more lasting effects. And pastina is so perfect for this time of year, when the days get shorter and everybody's a little bit melancholy. But having said that, this is so much more than just a mood elevator. All right, taste-wise and texturally, this is just an amazing thing to eat. And as long as you have some ready-to-use chicken broth around, you're only about 10 minutes away from enjoying something like this. And just because I dress this up and try to do a little more of a restaurant-style version does not mean you have to. Okay, as I mentioned, this is usually just finished with olive oil, black pepper, and some cheese. But whether you serve that basic version or toss on a few extra doodads like I did, this is something you should be making and eating on a regular basis, which is why I really do hope you give this a try soon. So please follow the links below for the ingredient amounts, a printable written recipe, and much more info as usual. And as always,